Alrighty, so this is Just We the People News. Sorry about that. Was intended to stretch this videos out a little bit longer, but bust water line. Freeze, fix, thaw out, proceed. All right, we never look straight forward, always look around us, be able to protect yourselves by any means necessary. Remember, people, and ask questions. Ask questions. Try not to incriminate yourself, okay? Always ask questions. All right, we're going to go back with the what? 19 rules that we in general incriminate ourselves. Just saying, people. All right, let's go.
We have all been indoctrinated, whatever you want to call it. We've all been believed or trained to believe that we must do what those in authority say. But my question is, why don't we ever question that? Why don't we ever question authority? You're going to notice as we get moving on further into our rules here that there's a rule here that talks about that. So, rule number 5, what is or is not the law will only be determined by the Constitution for the United States. Okay, so rule number 6. Or along those lines, the highest court in the land is the Supreme Court, and when the Supreme Court says this is the way it is, then by golly, this is the way it is. Okay? What do you guys think of that?
As long as they're following a set of laws that have already been established that they can operate by, and that's what we put them in for.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Does the Supreme Court get it right 100% of the time?
I don't think so.
No, I would say no, they don't. What's interesting, though, is looking at the rulings from the Supreme Court recently, it feels like they're moving more back to constitutionally sound principles. I'll give you just one example. There was a ruling that came from the Supreme Court in 1973. We all know that one. It was a terrible ruling. And it stood for 40-something years. Maybe no longer than that. Almost 50 years. Okay? And then it was recently overturned. So for 50 years, there was a bad precedent and a bad ruling, and it was overturned. So the Supreme Court doesn't get it right all of the time. But what's interesting, though, is when you look at our fundamental rights, especially as they are pertaining to due process, things of being criminally prosecuted, they get it right all the time. And there's hundreds of cases that you guys can find that pertain to specific arguments. So when we argue in court, when we put arguments on paper, we need to back up our arguments using decisions from the United States Supreme Court. And they're not as hard to find as you might think they are. There's a handful of cases that actually really go to the heart to everything that we argue. So stick to that rule, and you're going to be just fine. Even though these lower court judges, like these traffic court judges, these district court judges in some of these states, I mean, they're clueless. They're absolutely clueless. So even though you go in there and you have a sound argument from the United States Supreme Court and you get overruled and they move on and they continue to railroad you, that's fine. They're digging their own grave, proverbial speaking. Make sense?
Yeah, and I like that comment that Harrington just made about how governments can only regulate that which they create.
Yeah.
Is that just not like a big picture sort of a thing that most people miss? We're trained to see the trees, but we miss that there's the forest.
Yeah.
If they can get us to focus on the minutia detail of all the little rules and ordinances and laws and, blah, blah, blah that we're supposed to follow, but don't ever take that step back and let us realize that, wait a second, governments can't control men and women. They're only able to control their state creations. That's a huge concept that I wanted to make sure it was said out loud, because that's everything.
Does it make any sense to anybody where when you look at your Constitution, I know here in my state, Article 1, Section 1 of the Utah Constitution states that all political power is inherent in we the people. Section 2. Okay? So if we, the people, hold all of the power and we delegate some of our power to the government for our convenience and for our benefit, then how is it that the government can now control us? The
Because
creation.
Now, I'm going to pause right here for a second. Okay, so I looked up on Wikipedia consent of the governed. So, what this guy is talking about, we the people are the governed. We govern over the government, okay, by our consent. They can control us, but it's consent of the people, all right? Uh, we call it, consent of the governed. That is not government. That the governed is we the people. And Wikipedia actually got it wrong on the definition. Now, in most countries, they may got it right. But if you look it up in Wikipedia, the definition in the United States is incorrect. The governed is we the people. Okay? We have control over the government, not government over controlling us. Right? So Wikipedia basically saying that the government, by their consent, can do whatever they want to do to we the people, is basically what Wikipedia said. Okay? Again, I'm not an attorney, not giving legal advice. Okay? It's just my opinion only, the way I read it. Cover my ass. Okay?
Trying to control the creators. Does that make sense to anybody?
Well, they're criminals, James.
Well, I know that.
That's how.
and
And
they've
Joe
been
Biden
working
said it.
so
We have
hard.
16s. That's why, because
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
bullies.
Yeah.
They've been working so hard for decades and decades to dumb us down to the point where we don't hear the education. We don't hear it. Our children don't hear it in school. I'm teaching it because I'm teaching my own children.
Yeah.
But we can't expect that the government-run schools are going to teach any of that to our children.
That's true.
So,
Absolutely true. Harrington, you're my new best friend.
yeah.
He said he plagiarized the governments can only regulate that which they create. He plagiarized that from me, so I knew it sounded really good. All right, rule number 7. Justice, you want to read this one?
The foundation of your case starts at the scene of the crime and must be rooted in Supreme Court law and decision. We must
Okay.
build our case from the very start. Example, the scene of the crime.
Okay, what do I mean? What does George Gordon mean by the scene of the crime? What would you guys say is the scene of the crime?
As soon as a police officer or somebody else intervenes with you.
There you go. Very beginning. Yeah. So what this rule means is the minute you have an interaction with any government official, that is the scene of the crime. You must demand all of your rights that are available to you right then and there. Okay? You guys have heard of the case Miranda versus Arizona? You guys have heard that case? It was a pretty landmark case. The basis of the case was the Miranda fellow was actually a pretty bad dude. He did some really bad things to people, but what happened was when the police arrested him, they beat the living daylights out of him until he gave a confession. And then they used that confession to convict him. So the Supreme Court overturned that and vacated that judgment against Miranda and said, you guys, you cannot beat a confession out of somebody. That's not how this system works, and that's not how the rights work. And so the Miranda case sets some basic standards that law enforcement is required to follow when they make an arrest. But what happens if you're not arrested? Do you still have rights before that?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, of course you do. Yeah. You have to assert those, right? So you're going to hear a lot of conflicting things. Like, how many times have we had interactions with law enforcement, Justice or Erica, where you walk up and the officer says, well, I need you to give me some identification. I need to know who I'm talking to.
Only in the car I've had it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They pull you over, right? You're minding your own. You're just driving along. They pull you over and then they demand to know who you are.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No.
If they have a warrant, perhaps, after they've presented, some probable cause that I've committed a crime and...
Oh, I like where you're going with this, Erica. I like where you're going with this. This is what this rule means. You must set up the foundation of your case the minute you have an interaction with any government official, whether it's a law enforcement officer or some joker down at the local county or a local municipality or a code enforcement harasser on your property, whatever. Okay? You've got to be willing, you have to do that from the very beginning because what do we talk about right here, right? Respect power, rule number 8. Respect power, but always question authority. Just who the heck are you anyway? By what authority? So going back to our brief example, police officer comes up to the window and says, I pulled you over because you were speeding. What's your response? Oh, okay.
Can you prove
I'm
it?
going to need your license and registration.
I'd say prove it.
And this is exactly what George Gordon would say. He's like, okay, well who the heck are you? By what authority can you demand this information from me? Just who are you?
That's where I like Renee's response in calling 911.
Yeah. She called 911, right? I mean, you can do that, and I don't think it's a bad idea. But the cop comes up to your window and says, who are you? I need your license, or I need this. He's like, well, who are you? He's like, well, who wants to know? Answer a question with a question.
Right.
Do you know why I pulled you over? I just assumed you were bored.
And then you can say, well, did you have a warrant or something like that? Like,
or you could say,
what question would you ask instead of making a statement? What question would we ask?
Here's the question that I would ask. If a cop came up to me, pulled me over, and says, do you know why you pulled me over? And I said, well, do you have probable cause?
Right.
For pulling me over? Well, yeah, I mean, my probable cause is that you were speeding. Well, guess what? Here in the state of Utah, speeding is what's called an infraction. It's called a summary offense. It's not a crime. You must have probable cause of a crime.
Well, could you ask him, is speeding a crime?
You could. But again, do we want to have arguments with these morons on the side of the road?
No. But if you keep asking him questions.
We don't want guys with guns feeling like you're trying to make them look stupid.
Yeah. The last thing that you want to do is make them feel threatened in any sense of or imagine of the word.
Right.
I know, but you just said it, James. If you're not having fun,
I get that, but again, there's a fine line you have to walk there. It's like, so if he comes up to my window and says, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" And I'd say, "I have no idea, but I assume you have probable cause for stopping me today."
That's a really good response. I like that one.
I assume you have probable cause for stopping me today. Well, you were speeding. Okay. If you say so. I'm not going to be a wise... I can't say the word I want to say. I'm not going to be
wise guy?
A Weisenheimer?
Yeah, wise guy. There we go. That's the one I want to say. I was going to say the other one. I'm not going to be a wise guy, but I'm just going to say, well, if that's what you believe, if that's what you're alleging, okay? And then he's going to say, well, I'm going to need your license and registration. And then I'm going to say, wonderful, can I see the warrant, please?
Mm-hmm.
You have to demand your rights.
So let me ask a question.
Yeah.
Is there, I'm always coming...
Which we go back also as well. Can you use this against me in the court of law? Yes or no? Under threat, under duress, you can hand it to them. But you want it on record, and as some of you guys well established, always record. Always. That way when you file your case, you can go through your recording as well, put it on YouTube or whatever, right? But you got your everything that was said, and you can put on record, and then you got the video to back it up, because we know on their affidavit, under penalty of perjury, officers still lie. Okay? Allegedly, some of them.
From the place of I have no knowledge and I'm a beginner, right? So when I ask these questions, which I am to some extent still, you know me, but is there something that we can help folks out there with a list of questions that they could, let's say, keep on their visor, right? Or a
Yeah.
list of Supreme Court case law that states X, Y, and Z, like speeding is not a crime, those kinds of things. Is there something that we can provide for them?
I mean, yeah, there is, but is it going to help you on the side of the road? No.
Well, I think sometimes it just, with getting flustered, like you said, how you get flustered, like asking for a warrant. And if the police officer says, I'm not required to ask you for a warrant, you can pull that down and say, well, the Supreme Court says so right here, officer.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get to that here in some of the rules that we get moving on into, where you're going to see exactly what you need to do.
Yeah, because when you get excited, your brain, all the blood drains, right? And you really can't think well. So.
Oh, yeah, you do. Yeah. I mean, we're going to get to that, which is why it's important that we're covering these. But I love these questions because, yeah, I mean, like I said before, I mean, go back to, go back and review the video of that young man here in Farmington last year who was killed by the police. He was citing Supreme Court stuff left and right. Did they listen? No.
Well, they had an objective before they pulled him over. I think.
I agree. I think there was some serious things there, but again,
Okay, so we're going to end it there and try to shorten this down a little bit. Always record them. That way you have it on record, and when you start doing your paperwork, you can go by facts of the recording that contradict the affidavit the officers may or may not have lied on. This ain't cover that butt. All right, people? Delete laws, if you go there, whether you like him or hate him or whatever, he does have a pamphlet that would kind of help you as well. Okay? These will be the People News. Till the next one.